Good morning. This is Horizon's Middle East and Africa, our top stories this morning. Israel awaits the release of its last hostages after the two-year war with Hamas. 20 are believed to be alive and due to be returned to their families today. Fragile peace. President Trump makes his way to the Middle East to herald the peace deal. He'll address Israel's parliament and greet hostages before meeting with Arab and world leaders to sign the historic agreement ending the war. And trade hopes that Trump softens his tone on China, easing tensions which escalated on Friday on plans for additional 100% tariffs and export controls on critical software. Well, it's just gone 8 a.m. across the Emirates. I'm Jumana Bersachi in Dubai. It's difficult to overstate how important today is going to be for the region, for the families of those hostages who look like are going to be released in the next couple of hours, the Palestinians who are returning to their homes. So much going on. And of course, the U.S. president himself is set to land in the region in the coming hours. So we are giving you now some live images coming through from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. As you can see, a lot of excitement, some optimism, and really a lot of nerves ahead of how the next couple of hours are going to play out. So this is a big focus for our show. And we will get to that in a moment. But also, let me just run you through what has happened to markets over the course of the last few hours, especially because on Friday, a massive escalation came through from President Trump. He put out that very incendiary post on Truth Social, hinting that they could really raise tariff rates on Chinese goods by a significant amount by November the 1st, up to 100%, on top of the additional tariffs that are already in place now. But over the course of the weekend, he sort of dialed that back. And so, yes, a big escalation on the China-U.S. front, but at the same time, some hopes actually that there could be scope for compromise by that November 1st deadline. Today, what you're seeing is S&P futures actually leaning towards the green, up 1.2%. So the biggest decline since Liberation Day on Friday, with a massive pullback in Wall Street, the S&P wiping out all of its gains for the week, down 2.7%, the Nasdaq down 3.5%, but today leaning towards the green. So already recuperating, you could say, half of the losses almost from Friday. Not the case for MSCI Asia Pacific ex Japan. Japan is out on holiday today, so not included, but you can see the Hanover pretty negative this morning. Hang Seng down more than 3.5% in the Hanover, so 2.2%. A lot of red on these Asian bourses as we get into the European Open. And the dollar yen, you can see now holding in around 152, but a lot of fireworks on Friday as the dollar lost a lot of ground once that post came through. The yen rallied in sympathy versus the USD, and today you can see stabilizing around that 152 level. But of course, there has been plenty of speculation about what's going to happen with the yen from here, with the political backdrop in Japan. Also, big question mark at the moment, with LDP losing one of their key coalition partners. And then Bitcoin stabilizing today at 115,000, but a massive loser on Friday. We saw up to $20 billion worth of liquidations go through in the crypto space. Again, questions there about the extent of the liquidation, how many players were involved in that. But the point is, at one point, Bitcoin was down 12%. Today, stabilizing at around 115,000. So all asset classes got hit on Friday afternoon. And then in terms of regional bourses, I thought today was a good day to just take stock also at how some of these regional stock markets have done. This is year to date, actually over the course of the last year, so over a one-year time horizon. You can see that the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange is actually up 53%. And no surprise that insurance stocks, defense stocks have done quite well there. The Egyptian Stock Exchange up 25%. Later today, we are going to be speaking to a key Egyptian minister on the show as well to talk through some of the economic developments there. Abu Dhabi up 8.7%, and then Tadawul, the Saudi index, is actually down 4.8% over the course of the last 12 months, something that we have covered extensively. But this is just to show that stock markets, at least in the region, have been quite resilient despite everything that has been going on. So that leads us to our top story today. Hamas is expected to start releasing Israeli hostages this morning, marking the moment of truth for President Trump's fragile peace deal. Trump is on his way to the Middle East to herald the agreement ending the two-year Israel-Hamas war, and he's scheduled to address Israel's Knesset and greet hostages later today.
The war is over, okay? You understand that? I think people are... a lot of reasons why it's going to hold, but I think people are tired of it. It's been 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years. It's been 2 years. 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 2 It's been centuries, okay? Not just recent, it's been centuries. I think people are tired of it. Yeah, the ceasefire is going to hold.
To the Arab leaders and partners of ours who meant so much in this negotiation, including President Erdogan from Turkey, including Sheikh Mohammed from Qatar, including the Emir, including President Sisi, all of whom played a critical and an integral role in this peace deal. I say thank you.
President Trump will meet with many of those leaders that Steve Witkoff just referenced now later today at a summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, where there will be a signing ceremony for the Gaza peace deal. Let's go live now to Bloomberg's Dan Williams in Jerusalem. Dan, I think, as I was saying at the top of the show, it's difficult to overstate what a momentous day this is for Israel, for the families of those hostages who've been waiting for 2 years now, and, of course, for the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who have started the long return back to their homes and, very early stages of what could be reconstruction.
Indeed, it's daybreak in Jerusalem. I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that for many Israelis and Palestinians, there is a hope this will also be a new dawn for their
Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulties with Dan Williams. We will go back to him the second we reestablish connection. But for now, let's continue the conversation with our guest. And today we've got Adam Ramey. He is Associate Dean. Let me just get the full title up. He's Associate Dean of Social Science and Associate Professor of Political Science at NYU Abu Dhabi. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. Actually, I just want to go back to some sound that we played where President Trump declared that the war is over. Do you have faith that this ceasefire, this exchange of hostages for prisoners can actually lead to more long-term security and stability in the region?
Well, I think that, President Trump has certainly heralded this peace deal as not just a short-term ceasefire, but as a bedrock for long-lasting peace in the region. Citing not just the recent conflict of the last 2 years, but rather of the decades-long. I mean, he said centuries, but I think the broader point is he wants to sort of have a long-lasting peace and some sort of meaningful, deal that both the Israeli and Palestinian publics can live by. I think that President Trump has been sort of quite short-tempered with regards to Prime Minister Netanyahu's conduct of the war in Gaza. I think that he wanted this over with. He campaigned on bringing peace to the region and stability to the world in the lead up to the November elections. And now here he is, not even quite a year into his term yet, and the war had still kept going. And I think President Trump was losing patience. And certainly the more dovish or peace-seeking members of his inner circle, including Vice President J.D. Vance, are heralding this as well. I mean, this is what President Trump promised. He said he was going to bring a resolution to both the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in Gaza as well as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and here we are right now. It's taken far too long, but President Trump was able to get all the parties to the table and get them to agree to a set of terms that they would all find acceptable. And assuming everything goes well with the prisoner exchange, I think that we've got the kernel of something that can be built upon for the future. And certainly for the rest of President Trump's term, he'll be a partner for peace in that regard.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the fact that he is considered to be a partner for peace, receiving what is likely to be a hero's welcome in Israel and also in Egypt as well. I mean, he even said it's very rare that that both sides, the Arab leaders and Israel are happy with this outcome. But what do you make of the fact that Israel will not be present at the Gaza signing ceremony later this afternoon?
Well, I think it's very clear that this was a United States-led initiative. I don't think the Prime Minister Netanyahu wanted to wind things down anytime soon. It was President Trump that got all the parties to the table. And Netanyahu and his war cabinet are going along with it, but I think that the signal is quite clear. This is a Trump-led initiative. It's a Trump-led initiative that the Israeli public writ large endorses, and that the Arab publics endorse. And so he's getting the hero's welcome from the Israeli public and from foreign Arab leaders and Arab publics, but not so much from Netanyahu and his war cabinet.
What do you think happens to the Israeli Prime Minister from here? One of the most remarkable developments over the course of the weekend was the cheers that came from Hostage Square when President Trump's name was brought up, and the boos that ensued when the Israeli Prime Minister's name was brought up. Do you think that his domestic position is now untenable?
Oh, for sure. I think that it's remarkable. You know, in most countries around the world, when the country is attacked and there's some sort of major military engagement, there's what we call a rally around the flag effect, and incumbent governments get a huge boost. But Prime Minister Netanyahu, you know, saw a slight boost, but nothing material in that. And I think it's important to remember that before October 7th, 2023, there were massive protests in Tel Aviv, millions of people taking to the streets, protesting against Prime Minister Netanyahu's judicial reforms, calls for across the ideological spectrum, left, right, and center, among both Jews and Arabs within the Israeli state, for Netanyahu's government, for him personally to be held accountable and for his government to be brought down. And now with the war over, I think those voices are already clamoring for change. And just in the past week or so, opposition leader Yair Lapid was plotting his attempt to take down Netanyahu within the next couple of months. Indeed, Netanyahu's coalition has been very, very fragile from the get-go, relying on extremist voices on the Israeli right in order to cobble together a bare majority in the Knesset. And all it takes is one of those partners to back out, and the government could fall quite easily. So I would expect to see, especially in the coming weeks and months, not only calls for Prime Minister Netanyahu to be ousted, but actual attempts in the legislative chamber, the Knesset, to try to bring down the government and have new elections.
Okay, so that's on the Israeli side. Something else I want to flag over the weekend, there were multiple reports of fighting within the Gaza Strip, Hamas officials looking to reassert control and security in some areas and also punish those who they thought were allying themselves too closely with the Israeli side. What does that tell you about the challenge ahead in terms of reconstructing and rebuilding a credible governance in Gaza when Hamas themselves don't seem to want to let go so quickly?
Well, I mean, this is the challenge. I mean, so the Israeli military has pounded Gaza for 2 years now, and you know, while a huge amount of infrastructure is damaged and countless lives are lost, Hamas's ability to wage war is still largely intact. And though they've lost some leaders along the way, the essential apparatus of the Hamas-led government in Gaza and the military equipment to back that up are still there and still intact. And just as the withdrawal happened, I've seen countless images and videos from the Gaza Strip showing Hamas reasserting its presence in the area. And indeed, there are going to be reprisals, and it's going to be a challenge. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Prime Minister Netanyahu try to use this as a threat to say, well, you know, Hamas continues to rearm itself, we reserve the right to resume hostilities. I don't think President Trump would be too positive about that. But I think it's going to be a serious challenge. There were wide gaps between the government in Gaza versus the government in the West Bank, the Fatah-controlled government there, and how things are going to play out going forward are going to be incredibly tricky, because Gaza is going to need to be rebuilt, and the question is to whom is the rebuilding funds going to be directed, and is Hamas going to be able to exert unchecked authority like it did prior to October 7th to 2023, and that's something that only time is going to be able to tell.
Yeah. Very way of capturing some of the huge questions that await us in the coming months and years. Adam Ramey from NYU Abu Dhabi. But we've just got some lines crossing the terminal Now, Hamas has published the names of the 20 living hostages set to be released later this morning. Let's go back to Bloomberg's Dan Williams in Jerusalem. This is the moment that the families of those hostages have been waiting for. Dan, tell us about the mood in Israel today.
Good morning. Good to be back with you, Jumana. Yes, indeed, the sun is rising over Jerusalem. For many Israelis and Palestinians, a ray of sunshine, if you like, after a very, very dark period with this 2-year-old Gaza war. It's the end of the war, according to President Trump. He's hoping to put the diplomatic space in order for that in the afternoon when he meets with other regional leaders in Egypt. But for now, all the focus is on that hostage release, the first stage of the implementation of Trump's peace plan. We're hearing that Hamas, as you noted, has published the names of 20 living hostages. That appears to correspond to predictions made pretty much throughout the war, that just 20 of the 48 hostages remaining in Gaza are still alive. This will come as immense relief for the families of those hostages who are due to be reunited with them in the coming 2-3 hours. For the families of the dead hostages, a bittersweet day. They will have been prepared for this eventuality that their reunion will be with the remains of their loved ones. However, that will provide them with some closure. It's not entirely clear that all 28 bodies, the 28 bodies expected by Israel as part of this swap, will be delivered today. There is some question over whether even Hamas is capable of retrieving all of those bodies, but nonetheless, the recovery of the bodies really puts a line under this conflict, the recovery of the live hostages, and that will set into motion the remainder of this plan, it is hoped.
President Trump is set to be landing in Israel in the next couple of hours, addressing the Knesset, and then traveling on to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt for the Gaza signing ceremony. Just walk us through the choreography of the day, Dan.
Well, we will have rather an emotional yo-yo of a day for the president, for everyone watching him, and this is a story of global interest, obviously. He will receive a hero's welcome in Israel. His approval ratings are really through the roof. The city of Jerusalem is decked with American and Israeli flags. You can expect the walls behind me of Jerusalem's old city have already been illuminated with images of the U.S. flag. He's really seen as the man who brought to a close a war that was seen often impossible to conclude in a way that Israelis would deem satisfactory. So he will be coming here on a short trip of a few hours. He will be speaking at the Knesset, Israel's parliament. He will also be hearing speeches by the Israeli Prime Minister, opposition leader, parliamentary speaker, and meeting with the families of some of those hostages who are being recovered, apparently in the coming minutes.
Bloomberg's Dan Williams live from Jerusalem, an absolutely monumental day. And just for those who are just tuning in, Hamas have said that they are ready to release the 20 living hostages in the exchange deal, and they have published the names of the 20 Israeli hostages that are set to be released this morning. Still ahead this hour, we will be speaking to Egypt's Minister of Planning, Economic and Development and International Cooperation, Rania Al-Mashat, on her country's role in the peace talks and the nation's economic growth plans. Now, switching over to markets development, stocks in Hong Kong and mainland China have tumbled as investors remain concerned about trade tensions. That's as President Trump says tariffs for China are still the plan from November the 1st. But speaking aboard Air Force One, he called Chinese President Xi Jinping a smart man and a great leader.
I think we're going to be fine with China. Look, I have a great relationship with President Xi. He's a very tough man. He's a very smart man. He's a great leader for their country. He's a great leader. And I have a great relationship with him. I think we'll get it set. I know what happened. I really understand what happened, and I'm not even saying he's wrong. But then we met him with something much tougher than what he did to us. Again, because of the tariffs, it's much tougher.
Let's go to Shanghai and our China correspondent, Minmin Lo. Well, I mean, quite the market reaction on Friday, the worst day for Wall Street since April. But it seems as though over the weekend, President Trump is pulling back from the brink a little bit.
Yes, and we did see the market reaction reflecting that as well. If you look at the Hang Seng Index, we saw a decline there, but certainly much less than the declines that we saw last Friday in the U.S. session. And yes, President Trump appearing to provide an off-ramp to President Xi here. He wrote on Truth Social, "Don't worry about China, it'll all be fine. The U.S. wants to help China, not hurt it." We also heard something similar from J.D. Vance as well on Fox News, calling on China to choose the reasonable path, saying that the U.S. will reciprocate with reasonable actions as well. But you know, what I'm hearing here from people here in Shanghai, from official circles, from the private sector, and also what I'm getting from what state media has been publishing so far, it seems like the Chinese side is seeing this as the U.S. acting in bad faith, and there is a breakdown of trust, whether or not China can continue to trust the U.S. to keep up its end of the bargain in any trade truce, because it seems like the Chinese Commerce Ministry, at least officially, they're defending their action, saying that this is a defensive act in response to the U.S. Adding new restrictive measures after the two sides had agreed to a sort of truce, especially after the Madrid talks. And you can see on this graphic here, the Commerce Ministry saying that they will not hesitate to take retaliatory action to protect the legitimate rights and interests of the Chinese economy.
Yeah, I mean, they've talked of retaliation, possibly further retaliation. What other options does China have? Because the rare earths leverage is a pretty powerful one, a pretty powerful tool that China has, not only on the U.S., but over the rest of the world.
Yes, indeed. And this time, China has really used the strongest attempt yet of its rare earth leverage, because the latest tightening of the rare earth export controls last week provided extraterritorial jurisdiction as well. It places control on overseas exporters that sell products with even trace amounts of rare earths from China. So this would disrupt any mitigation measures from the U.S. seeking to get alternative rare earth magnets from the likes of Germany or Japan or other allies. But at the same time, the Chinese Commerce Ministry made it clear as well that this is an export control. It's not a ban. It's sort of giving that space for negotiation as well, because the Chinese Commerce Ministry is saying they just need to get the license from the Commerce Ministry, and China will be willing to work with countries to, you know, expand dialogue and to smooth the path to ensure that rare earths continue flowing. So there is, you know, from both sides signals that they do want dialogue to happen, and we still have a couple of weeks until November 1st when those threatened tariffs would kick in. So we'll see if both sides manage to dial down tensions from there. But so far we have seen Chinese exports still holding up pretty well as well. We got the trade numbers today, surprising to the upside, over 8% increase on year, and much higher than what we saw last month, 4%. We are seeing increase in imports as well, and it shows you that China is resilient and agile enough to respond to the shifting trade flows, with the U.S. becoming a less important part of its economy.
Yeah, Min, well, luckily we have a specialist with us to talk through some of the implications on the Chinese economy as well. Min Lo in Shanghai. U.S. equity futures are rebounding alongside crude as trade rhetoric cools down. Gold, though, continuing to find new highs. Joining us now is Trinh Nguyen, Natixis Emerging Asia Senior Economist. Trinh, how do you see all of this playing out? Is it Trump posturing in the hope that he's going to get a deal with President Xi before November the 1st? I mean, how should you be trading this, if at all, in the coming weeks?
Well, I do think that the maximalist position is very unlikely, but I think what we're looking at is that U.S.-China tensions continue to be very escalated. China is weaponizing, obviously, its supply chains, but the U.S. is also its market access. And I think those 2 points are not going to disappear. They're just going to be mitigated by the talks upcoming. The fact that China trade data exports were quite strong today point to the fact that it's probably going into these talks a bit more confident, which suggests that there's not a lot of room to also concede as well.
So I was going to ask you about that. What do you make of China's trade numbers today? Because as it stands, they still have a much higher tariff rate than the existing tariff rate for other countries around the world. And yet they continue to post these very strong export numbers. How and where are they exporting to?
Absolutely. China has cheap prices, right? We have deflation onshore, and as a result, it's able to compete externally, given the fact that it's much more competitive. Exports to the U.S. declined sizably, and so it's flooding much of this more to Southeast Asia, to India, to the rest of the world, to the EU. So the trade deficit is widening with China, with the rest of the world. And I think one of the key points here is that exports continue to be a key growth driver for China, and that is going to be a point of contentions moving forward. You can see that tensions are rising with the EU, the fact that it's now has a bigger trade deficit in September than the U.S., also with the rest of the Asian countries. It's a very uncomfortable position for Asia. On the one hand, it gets to import cheaper goods, which causes a deflation in goods. But on the other hand, we have a gradual process of deindustrialization where firms are not able to compete with these cheaper goods coming through their shores. So it creates a tension in that while the Asian traders of the region are unhappy with Trump protectionism and tariffs, it's also finding very difficult to find an alternative market to the U.S. As China imports less. So the year-to-date number shows a contraction, even though exports continue to accelerate. And that points to the fact that it faces both competition with China, but at the same time not able to export more to the Chinese market.
And Trinh, just succinctly here, do you think that this is actually going to lead to further inter-regional barriers as well? You know, the likes of India wanting to perhaps protect their own industrial market?
Absolutely. And I think that some countries would do that much more than others. Some are in a less position. Obviously, we have a situation with Thailand where you have political paralysis. We have a situation in Indonesia where the country is much more dependent for China for trade and investment. So the room to maneuver is much less. But we clearly will see much more trade barriers throughout the world to protect their markets. And it's going to probably start with steel and widen out to other areas. But irrespective, in the short term, this is going to be a sugar rush that's going to lead to greater tensions and also deindustrialization within Asia.
Trinh, thank you so much. Trinh Nguyen, Natixis senior economist from Emerging Asia. Well, coming up, we're going to talk about Egypt with Egypt's Minister of Planning and Economic Development. Good morning. This is Horizon's Middle East and Africa, our top stories this morning. Israel awaits the release of its last hostages after the 2-year war with Hamas. 20 are believed to be alive and due to be returned to their families today as Palestinian families return to a devastated Gaza. Fragile peace. President Trump makes his way to the Middle East to herald the peace deal. He'll address Israel's parliament and greet hostages before meeting with Arab and world leaders to sign the historic agreement ending the war. And trade hopes. Trump softens his tone on China, easing tensions which escalated on Friday on plans for additional 100% tariffs and export controls on critical software. Well, it's just gone 8:30 a.m. across the Emirates. I'm Jumana Bersachi in Dubai. Major day in the region. We are going to stay on top of all of the developments. President Trump should be landing in the next couple of hours to Israel. This as Hamas just released the names of the 20 hostages that are also due to be released in the coming hours. So really momentous day, and we will continue to monitor those developments. But for now, let's just bring it back to markets. So much volatility and fireworks on Wall Street towards the close on Friday. Big pullback for the S&P, down more than 2.6% by the end of the day. NASDAQ also down 3.7%, its biggest shakeout since Liberation Day. So really just tells you how markets reacted adversely to that Trump post that he put up on Truth Social, suggesting that they were going to go down harder on China and possibly introduce another 100% tariffs. That being said, over the course of the weekend, he seems to have dialed back the tone and insinuated that there is still scope for negotiations and that that meeting with President Xi could still happen. So that is the mood as we head into today. S&P futures leaning towards the green, up 1.2%, but the handover from Asia Pacific, Japan are out for a holiday. It's very, very negative. As you can see, red there, down 2.1%. Hang Seng really feeling the brunt of the sell-off this morning, down more than 3.5% as we talk about that handover. Dollar yen sitting just shy of 152, though we did see a massive jump in the yen versus the USD. The USD losing a lot of ground after that Truth Social post came out today, though the dollar regaining some of its footing, up 0.5% versus the yen. And then Bitcoin, again, stabilization here, but we saw almost $20 billion worth of liquidations go through in the crypto space on Friday. At one point, Bitcoin was down 12% in trading. So a lot of liquidations across all asset classes. Today, the theme is one of stabilization. And let's just take a moment also to reevaluate regional bourses. Price action over the past year. Big day for the region. You can see that most regional indices have actually had a good run over the past year. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange up 53%. The Egyptian index up 25% over the last 12 months. The only, I would say, underperformer has been the Saudi Tadawul index, down 4.8% over the course of this year, as markets have paid a lot of attention to Saudi spending plans in addition to the backdrop of lower oil prices. All right, President Trump plans to visit Egypt to celebrate a peace deal that has halted the fighting in Gaza. Egypt played a key role in brokering the agreement, which was secured after negotiations with the U.S., Qatar, and Turkey. Joining us now is Rania Al-Mashat, Egypt's Minister of Planning, Economic Development and International Cooperation. Good morning to you, Minister. Really important day to have you on. And Egypt, of course, our center stage with that Gaza peace ceremony taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh, and Egypt being one of the key countries that was mediating to get the peace deal across the line. Your thoughts on the significance of today and what it could potentially mean for regional stability?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, it's a very important day, not just for the region, but for the world. We know that there has been 2 years of suffering by the Palestinian people. So to reach some resolution and put in the foundations for peace is going to be fundamental for the future. Moreover, the world has also been affected by the economic implications of what has happened in the Suez Canal as a route for international trade. So we are looking forward to a good day, a day where you have leaders from around the world. Our president, His Excellency Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, has been very resolute since the beginning with a very clear vision, a vision of resolution and a vision of pushing forward with respect to the rights under international law.
You mentioned the economic impact the regional instability has had, not least on Egypt, the transit through Suez Canal. How do you expect upside risk to present itself in the coming months should this deal actually hold?
Just looking at the participation globally, the deal being brokered through President Trump and also the help of Egyptian leaders as well as those from the region, we do look forward to seeing a more lasting resolution, one that provides calm in the area. And therefore, with the resumption of Suez Canal vessels moving in there, I think that is going to be very, very positive, whether it is for Egypt or for the cost of trade globally.
With the hit to some of the receipts coming through from the Suez Canal, what remedies did the government put in place to sort of try to compensate for that?
We have embarked on very important reforms in March 2024. And this is despite the headwinds from the impacts of the conflict in the region. This was reforms related to fiscal discipline, monetary policy, a flexible exchange rate, caps on public investments. All of this has led to a GDP growth which is now averaging 4.5%. Last quarter was 5%. All of this pushed by an economic model that is based on more industrialization, more tradables. When you take a look at Egypt's GDP growth, you will see that the sources of growth have come from more economic activity in manufacturing, again, benefiting from the very important reforms that happened, macro reforms that happened in March 24. This is continuing through a very ambitious structural reform program where we are looking at increasing competitiveness, increasing private sector engagement, and also benefiting from green investments in the country.
Yeah, and indeed, the S&P upgrade came through last week, which is an endorsement of some of the policies that you put in place. Egypt has signed a number of agreements, investment deals over the last 18 months or so with the likes of UK, EU, UAE, obviously, to name a few. What other partners are you looking for? And could we expect to see more of these types of deals in the coming months?
So we've put together a very detailed economic reform program named Egypt's Narrative for Economic Development. In it, we identify sectors which are considered priorities to attract foreign investments and also benefit from the very robust infrastructure that was put in place over the past few years. So when you mention UK, when you mention the EU, UAE, other countries, there is a lot of inflows with respect to investments in different areas, particularly in ports. The tourism is doing very well. We feel that 2026 is going to be an inflection point where the different sectors are going to be contributing, notwithstanding, of course, the decline in the Suez Canal receipts. We've seen a rebound in remittances. We've seen a rebound in tourism. And as I mentioned, what is key for growth and jobs has been manufacturing. And we see many companies coming in the Suez Canal economic zone and many other places to actually either increase equity in existing companies, do joint ventures, or actually start new firms. So all of this is a story which is evolving in a steady way. And the benefits we are seeing in lower inflation, greater productivity, and higher GDP growth.
Yeah, and Rania, I know you're a very busy lady, and you're heading on to the IMF meetings this week. Egypt's program, obviously, up for a review. What are some of the key items that are going to be discussed?
So for us, we are traveling to Washington for the World Bank and IMF meetings. As you know, Egypt, under the IMF program, has also important partnerships with the EU, with the World Bank. So there are different sources of financing linked to our ambitious structural reform program. As I mentioned, we look forward to discussing the reforms that are taking place. The S&P upgrade, as you mentioned, was a testament that these reforms are gaining traction. And as was mentioned in that report, there are many points to the upside, provided we are continuing with the reforms. We are committed to the reforms. We are opening up the economy, increasing competition, and also trying to reduce the bottlenecks that we had seen over the past years. Once again, this is happening despite the very tough regional geopolitical landscape. So as this is also going to be hopefully moving in the right direction after today's big summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. This is all going to be positive for the Egyptian economy, and therefore there are very important dividends and gains for those who invest in Egypt.
Minister, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us. A very, very big day for the region and for Egypt as well. Rania Al-Mashat, Egypt's Minister of Planning, Economic Development and International Cooperation. And coming up, Saudi Arabia seems to be leaning more on global debt as local listings slow. We'll ask Amwal Capital Partners what this shift means for investor appetite and the kingdom's funding plans. This is Bloomberg. Well, if you're joining us now, some breaking news coming through. Army radio in Israel is citing that the first 6 hostages to be released in Gaza City. You're looking at live images from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, where families, where so many members of the public are waiting in anticipation for this milestone moment, waiting for 2 years now for their loved ones, for the hostages to be released. And a short while ago, Hamas published the names of the 20 Israeli hostages that are set to be released this morning. So all of that is set to come in the coming hours, possibly even the coming minutes. High level of anticipation. And of course, this marks the very first step of a very long process. And the hostage release will happen at the same time as Palestinian prisoners and detainees will also be released at the same time. So that is all going to happen in coming hours, in addition to President Trump landing in Israel shortly. So we will keep you up to speed on anything we hear out of there. All right, switching back to regional bourses, markets, funding, we're seeing a notable shift in how Saudi Arabia is financing its economic ambitions. The government and key state entities seem to be leaning more heavily on debt as they slow the pace of local share sales. The Public Investment Fund, for instance, just completed its first Eurobond sale, drawing strong investor demand with orders totaling over 6.9 billion euros. This growing reliance on global debt markets comes amid lower oil prices, rising fiscal pressures, and cooling sentiment on the local bourse. For now, we're joined by Zeina Rizk, co-head of fixed income at Amwal Capital Partners. Before we talk about funding and the scale of the borrowing that Saudi Arabia has undertaken, how much of a surprise was it to anyone who looks at the Saudi Arabian market that their budget deficit number came so much wider than they had projected at the beginning of the year?
Good morning, Romano. Indeed, usually the budget that Saudi used to be pretty much respected, and the issuance used to be pretty much respected. This year, it did come as a surprise that the budget was significantly bigger. But then when you look at the breakdown of that, lower oil prices, lower revenues, and increased spending would obviously lead to such. I mean, the fiscal break, even depending on how you look at it and what you include in it, is around $98 per barrel. So we're massively lower than that.
Yeah. So one of the reports that came out last week, my colleague wrote about this, is the fact that they are leaning less on local listings. So state-owned companies no longer really going down the path of IPOs. And what Saudi Inc. has been doing is issuing and relying on a lot more debt at a sovereign level or via some of these other entities as well, such as PIF.
Absolutely.
How much of an impact is that having on their borrowing costs?
The borrowing cost has been wider than other GCC countries and even lower-rated peers. So we've had this year close to $40 billion of issuance from Saudi between sovereigns, PIF and Aramco. But yes, spreads are wider than, say, Abu Dhabi and Qatar, 30 to 40 basis points wider. And if you compare even Saudi to Indonesia, which is like significantly lower rating, Saudi trades few basis points inside of Indonesia. So this is obviously reflected from the amount of issuing and from the wider spread and the expected upcoming supply. But I mean, it remains a very strong fundamental country. Reserves are still very strong. And I think if you were to compare between, say, Indo and Saudi, you'd go for Saudi any day.
Right. So let me just ask you about your thoughts on the increased reliance on debt to raise the amount of funds that's necessary in the country. I mean, as a bond investor, do you think that this is a significant development?
Not a massive development yet. I mean, I think that the shift will be between the two. We were expecting Saudi to come back to the market before year-end, but now that we saw the news that they're going through international loan instead of coming back to the market. If the loan goes through, they won't come back. They will come back in Q1. So far, the massive change is not significant for spread to move wider. But I mean, obviously, if the IPO market closes massively, there will need to be a bigger shift towards that. And then, yes, I think that we will see a bigger impact on spreads.
Okay, so we've been talking about sovereign, quasi-sovereign debt issuance, but also there's been a massive pickup in some of the bank paper issuance as well. The banks are looking for funding. Does that create some sort of a cannibalization effect and that it will likely attract these same type of investors, or is it not something to be concerned about?
The cannibalization from AT1s is towards real equities, not towards sovereigns. So the sovereign investors and the massive investors in the sovereign are usually bigger, and you have crossover, and you have the Asian investor and the American investor. When it comes to bank AT1s, issuers are smaller usually. So those usually retail investors would shift away from an equities into the AT1 market, but I wouldn't see it as impacting the sovereign spreads.
Okay. And Zeina, let me just bring it back to the macro question, which is, with oil trading around $65, this is the status quo. Should oil prices drop further, does that again raise questions about the risk premium that is embedded in Saudi Arabia's borrowing costs right now?
Absolutely. So the way we look at it is not oil dropping, but how long oil would stay lower. But yeah, absolutely. If oil drops and stays lower, there will need to be a revision, be it from moving plans, like moving projects or delaying some projects if possible, and diversifying funding needs, because if oil drops and the cuts, I mean, they have revised spending plans for next year. If this consolidates, oil stays high, we're fine. If it drops, then I think more serious revision has to be made.
Okay. And while I have you, the big news of the day, the Gaza peace deal, President Trump is heading to Sharm el-Sheikh later today. We're just speaking to Egyptian minister. Do you expect Egypt to gain some positivity, some dividends on the back of what could be more regional security?
I mean, lower geopolitical risk is obviously positive and seen positively. From a market's perspective, from a fixed income perspective, even in the midst of a war, the impact was limited. So I don't think from a credit perspective, maybe from an FDI perspective, it might be more positive. From a credits market, there has been some sort of complacency when it comes to this matter.
Okay. Zeina, thank you so much. That was Zeina Rizk, co-head of fixed income at Amwal Capital Partners. Well, for more of these stories looking into the intersection of wealth and power in the region, sign up for our Mideast Money newsletter on Bloomberg.com. And coming up, South African officials investigating how local technology ended up in Russian drones used to attack Ukraine. More on that story next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Horizons Middle East and Africa. I'm Jumana Bersachi in Dubai. South African authorities are investigating how a locally made component ended up in Russian drones used to attack Ukraine. The equipment in question is a laser rangefinder, which was not designed for military use. For more, we're now joined by Bloomberg's Anthony Squazan. Tell us about this story. Quite fascinating. What do we know?
Well, basically, the laser rangefinder is a piece of equipment that's used to detonate the drone when it approaches its target. So it's pretty crucial and pretty dangerous. So the South African government wasn't aware that this was happening, and they'll now be sending inspectors to the factory where it's made and basically assess it from there. Because by law, the company should really have had a permit, and South Africa, by law, does not export arms to countries at war, which Russia obviously is. So it's a little bit problematic.
And could this discovery perhaps reignite some of the tensions between South Africa and the U.S.?
I think it's more uncomfortable than reigniting tensions. Obviously, it's not a good development for South Africa. It's quite embarrassing. South Africa has presented itself as a neutral party between the two countries, Ukraine and Russia. But obviously, supply chains are quite hard to manage, and it wasn't sold directly to Russia. It appears to have been sold by a reseller, and somebody appears to have taken it to Russia and used it in these drones. I think there will be an attempt to tighten up the supply chain and to look at the company in question, but I'm not sure it's going to be a huge diplomatic spat.
Okay. Bloomberg's Anthony Squazan, thank you so much for bringing us that story, very specific to South Africa and military equipment. But let us just recap the top story of the day, which is that the hostages that have been held in captivity for the past 2 years are set to be released this morning. Earlier, about an hour ago, Hamas published the names of the 20 hostages who are set to be released. Right now, you are looking at live images from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. The families, members of the public, waiting with anticipation, with bated breath, to see when the first releases are going to take place. Those are images from Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip. And of course, in exchange for the release of the hostages, there will be a release of up to what we're seeing now is the latest numbers, 1,700 Palestinian prisoners and detainees. This was a very contentious part of the process of negotiations that took place last week because it was necessary for Israel to sign off on some of the names of the prisoners that were going to be released. Some were serving life sentences and were contentious, including the names of Mohammed Barghouti, who does not seem like is going to be released in this round. So the IDF have said now that Red Cross are on their way to the meeting point to receive the first batch of hostages. That is the latest news that we have. The Israeli Army radio are saying that the first 6 hostages will be released in Gaza City. There's a helicopter approaching as we speak, so unclear yet exactly who is on that helicopter, but we do know in a very short while the first round of hostages, the first set of hostages are going to be released, and this is a hugely momentous day. In a couple of hours' time, at around 10 a.m. local, so in about 1 hour's time, President Trump is due to land in Israel as well. He has been invited to deliver a speech at the Knesset. After that happens, he will be making his way on to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt for that Gaza peace signing ceremony with many key Arab leaders and European leaders there in attendance as well. But you're looking at live images now with the short release, upcoming release of the first round of hostages since October 7. That's it for Horizons Middle East. I'm Jumana Bersachi in Dubai.